Good evening. Discussing here some of the topics in Chapter 10, and I'm going to kind of treat this like I was giving a report on some of our ability groupings at our school to our school board, because we do a good handful of ability grouping in the Bellevue Public Schools. Um, and so I'm going to kind of treat it like this, where I'm reporting to the school board some of the things that we find that are working well, some of the things that we find that maybe aren't working well, and how we kind of come up with our decisions. So um, I first want to start with kind of describing what ability grouping is, and kind of give a description of what that is. Some of my findings in terms of definition of what is ability grouping: it's a practice of making student grouping based on ability and achievements for groups' needs. Um, in the Bellevue Public Schools, we currently right now are using ability groupings in what we call our math labs and in our reading sessions with our FAME program. And I'm going to address mostly the math lab simply because I have the most knowledge of that, and I have the most experience with that. In terms of our math labs are designed to use an extra math period for most of our struggling students who struggle in the area of their math classes, and or they are struggling on whether that be a MAP test or a Terra Nova test, any one of those from the past. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll base our information on their MAP testing results from their freshman year. Right now, all of our freshmen currently MAP test 4 times a year, once at the beginning, once at the towards the middle of the first quarter to end of first quarter, and then once at the beginning of the second semester, and then once at the end of the year, just to see what kind of progress they make, and also to see what kind of skills that we need to improve on. And what we do is we use those MAP test results to decide what skills to focus our time on in those math labs. The math lab is designed for 2 things. Number one, to catch up on any missed skills, and also to give the student a little bit more time to work on things like homework, and give them time to also ask questions if they're not understanding things. So it gives them a little bit more flexibility and opportunity for help. And currently, right now, I'm talking about a lower ability grouping. We also have our, our AP classes, and they do certain ability groupings there, where they take some of the higher level kids and they work in different groups there as well. But mostly in the math area, we have these math labs. Now, some statistics from our math labs. There were currently 97 students in our math labs, and that covers 3 different subject areas. It covers Algebra 1, covers Algebra 2, and it covers Geometry. And there are 97 students in those math labs, and one of the statistics that I think we decided was kind of a success of our program so far is the fact that only 8 of those 97 failed in the first semester this year. So we felt like that was a major step of progress. That's one of our goals, was to help the student pass their math classes. The other was to help them improve on their basic skills and skill areas according to the MAP test. And we noticed that as a result, over 84% of our students were able to advance a skill level on their math scores. So we feel like the lab is producing a lot of success. And the statistics show it, that's happening. Now, some things that we're able to do in our math labs and by the ability grouping is we're able to tailor instruction to meet our needs, especially of our lower students. Um, we're also able, we not only have lower level students, but we also have those HAL students as well. I mean, I have 2 HAL students in my lab, and they struggle in math class, but it also provides us the opportunity to maybe get them to reach higher levels than what they've been able to before, because we can kind of advance it in there as well. Again, the data, or we make data-based decisions. We don't just make them off the cuff. We do use map test results um, in there as well. Some of the things that maybe would detract us from using these ability groupings, and I want to kind of discuss a little bit about how these things may not or would maybe want to have students not be part of this ability group. Um, and that would be the case if we have too many groupings of students. Some teachers maybe have 20 students in a group for a math lab. Well, that's too many. We found that out. We've had 2 math lab teachers who've had 20, and they've both come back and said that's just too many. It's too hard to work with each student individually or each group individually, and they just don't have enough time. So we've kind of limited it to 15 students, 15 or less, in our groups. The other things that may detract is the fact that they feel sometimes those students maybe feel like they're treated differently, um, and that maybe they're not. They feel like they're not as smart, or that people may, or students may, maybe make fun of them because they're in the lab. Those are some of the things that would detract it. Now, I've kind of went through and discussed some of this, but I want to discuss too. Some things that I put in my paper in terms of when you decide to use ability groupings, how do you assign teachers to teach those groups? So how do you decide what teacher would be the best to put in that group? Because I think this is something that is, I think it's overlooked so much, in that when we get groups of like lower level students, we always want to put the first year teacher or the most inexperienced teacher, put them with that group, and put our most experienced and our best teachers with the upper level groups because we think they can push them. And some of the things that I found, according to one of the resources that I found from Susan Hallam in this article that I have, she said here that within ability group classes, differentiation of work should include high status teachers being allocated to teach the lower sets. I think that's such an important thing. I think you should be taking your best teachers and using them to help the struggling students, not using your first and second year and third year teachers simply because they're just new. Um, I think using that is very important. The couple of other things here that I noticed that kind of stuck out to me. Teachers need to have high expectations of their students in the lower sets. A lot of times you'll see, maybe a teacher sees a list of students and they see a couple names and they're like, "Oh, I've got Johnny again." You know how Johnny is. They've got to set higher expectations, and I get it. I mean, it's hard. I've had low-level students before. I taught in an alternative school. It's a challenge, but as an educator, I think that's really important. Another thing that I really kind of think that it's really important. This is the final thing that I want to talk about, is that the school needs to value, or excuse me, should demonstrate that it values all of its students, whether it be high level, low level. And I think if you're able to accomplish that, I think if you're able to accomplish that, then grouping doesn't become such a big deal. There's not as much to it. Now, the last thing I want to discuss here is some alternatives to grouping. So as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, and I'm looking at all this data, and error grouping has worked, but let's say we don't have that opportunity anymore. Right now we're going through budget cuts, and we're trying not to cut teachers, so we're going to have to cut some. We're going to have to cut some programs, and maybe the math lab is a possibility. If that is, some alternatives to grouping, and this is a list from Susan Hallam in the article that I read. She said, provide equity of opportunity. So provide opportunity for everybody. Encourage cooperative behavior and social integration. So allow students to help each other. Allow students to work together. Provide positive role models for less able pupils. Again, that goes back to providing the best teachers for those students. Allow pupils to work at their own pace. This is really a big push right now, I think, with the flipped classroom. and also with using technology and all of those types of things, I think that all kind of goes back to it, that this would be a great alternative to grouping, and that allowing students to work at their own pace, but also yet achieving the standards you need to achieve. And then finally, force teachers to acknowledge that the students in their class are not a homogeneous group and encourage differentiation. And I think that this last part goes to we need to do a better job in our school systems with professional development. And I think differentiation is a big part of that. I think everybody likes to talk about it. I think everybody um, likes to use the big word, but I don't know that everybody. I don't think that everybody puts a great deal of emphasis on it as much as they should. So I think that's a big part that we can look at. Those are kind of some different things, some alternatives to grouping. That if we did have to get rid of the labs, then I think those things would be successful. Okay, so I appreciate giving me the time to discuss kind of our programs here at Bellevue, and I hope you enjoy, and I'm interested to know any comments.